Hello, I'm Dr. Stephen Hassan with another edition of the Influence Continuum. And as you know, as a regular listener, perhaps, I do a lot of content about undue influence and destructive cults and how much they hurt the human spirit. And I so am excited to introduce you to Kristi Nelson because I read her book. I actually listened to you read the book, and it was
Mm.
even better. So I strongly recommend the audio. The name of the book is called Wake Up Grateful, The Transformative Practice of Taking Nothing for Granted. Um, and I'm going to do a short intro, if I may. Kristi, you are the executive director of a network for grateful living, and your life work has been in the nonprofit sector, focused on leading, inspiring, and strengthening organizations committed to progressive social and spiritual change. And your story was about discovering you had cancer and just undergoing stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I was like, oh my God, that's what I had. I was stage 2, but I still needed surgery and 3 months of chemo and 21 radiations.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, it was a real shock to have cancer. I have cancer. And for me, I relied on a clinical hypnotist psychologist to help me get through all my treatments. So I would see this man, Max, weekly, and he'd make a recording to just lower my fear and lower my stress and prepare
Lovely.
me for all of the ordeals of
Mm.
of it. I can say so much more about your background. You've been involved with Kripalu. You were leading the Regional Women's Fund. I'm going to let you talk about it, but you are wonderful. I'm so excited to meet you.
Thank
And
you so much.
waking up grateful is so simple and so hard to
It
do.
is.
But let me pass the microphone to you, Kristi, and please share with my
Mm.
listeners about your
Mm.
story and what you want to teach today.
Thank you, Stephen. Well, I'll make a little go at it, and then we'll see where we go from here.
Great.
What comes to mind, and all of this is just unrehearsed, and I never do the same thing twice. But what comes to mind, based on what you're saying, is that I started the book with this line. The introduction is "Not dying changed everything." And that's a pretty wild line. And I've often thought, God, was that the right line to start the book with? Was it not? But I think it's so powerful because it's an opportunity for perspective and reframing every single day that we are alive. So every day that we wake up, we didn't die. And that is something that literally hundreds of thousands of people right now in this moment would give absolutely anything to have this day that we have. And
Mm-hmm.
yet we tend so much to thumb our noses at it, to wish it was different, to want a different life, and mostly just to take it for granted, mostly just to go through the day half asleep, half awake, um, somewhat begrudgingly often, and envious, and all the different things that we're prone to. And it's not that those things are bad, it's that they're much better to hold against a backdrop of feeling really grateful for the privilege of being alive another day, because we just have zero idea when that privilege is going to be over. And it could literally be for me today, it could be this afternoon, it could be tomorrow. And so it's a radical concept. I think it's pretty wild and out there, just to accept and work with the fact of our mortality. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's a powerful invitation to being more fully alive and being more joyfully alive, generously alive, gratefully alive. That's it.
Yeah, and as you're talking, I was getting back in my mind to a near fatal van crash I had April 23rd, 1976, where I fell asleep at the wheel of a Mooney van and woke up as I was smashing into the back of a tractor trailer truck at 80 miles an hour.
Wow.
And it took them like a half an hour to pry me out of the wreckage. And they were like, it's a miracle you're alive,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
the whole thing was crushed.
Yeah.
And so, in my mind of activism for 46 years, standing up to big cults and everything else, that idea that I was given more time
Yeah. Yes.
on earth, what am I going
Yeah.
to do with it?
I think right. And so I think the book is called Wake Up Grateful because I think actually, Stephen, we respond to wake up calls like that sometimes, and sometimes we don't at
Hmm.
our peril. And, honestly, I think sometimes things happen in life, and I talk all the time about the car accidents that aren't worse and where you're sitting on the side of the road and you go, oh my God, I can't believe I'm alive. This is the most amazing thing in the whole world. I'm never going to scoff at another moment of my life, and then you forget that in about 12 seconds. So I think my feeling is that when we have those experiences, what I would call wake up calls towards whatever they are, and a lot of times it comes through illness, it comes through loss, our loss of other people we love, it comes through, it can come through getting out of a cult. You could say that. Like, what are the things that give us a second chance on life? And
Hmm.
so, this whole idea of getting a second chance, or sometimes a third or a fourth, there's a point at which those chances run out. But every day that we wake up in the morning, every day we're alive, is a second chance. And so that's what I try to cultivate, is that awareness that it
Hmm.
doesn't have to take this radical wake up call. It doesn't have to take almost losing my life, like a hair's distance from death,
Right.
because in truth, there's so much to appreciate about this opportunity to be alive as it is. And it's nice not to have to go through those huge wake up calls to remember what's important to us, to live in a way that acknowledges what really matters most deeply to us, really to be fully alive to the day and to the people around us. And to me, I think the most radical practice of all, and I say it all the time, but it is so hard to take nothing for granted, because you just literally live in kind of a blown out, awestruck state, that life is so incredible that to sit here in technology that you and I now have access to that was not around five,
Right.
10 years ago.
Hmm.
It doesn't take a whole generation to change our lives in terms of what we have access to. So just the number of things that are extraordinary, flowers like here, oh, I have, just,
Mm.
just, and if we allow ourselves to notice and drink in, one of the principles of grateful living is the ordinary is extraordinary.
Hmm.
So if we allow ourselves to really drink that in and live like, wow, the ordinary is extraordinary. If I walk through my day, what are the ordinary things that I'm going to be allow myself to really be moved by,
Hmm.
including the people in my life, and maybe most especially the people in my life. Just to not take any of it for granted.
Right. And as I was listening to the book, and I was looking forward to the next page and the next chapter, I was just reflecting on how many of my clients and my friends who've been through terrible, horrific, life challenging experiences, including cults, they are cynical, and they've lost a joy in life,
Mm, mm.
and appreciation. And as I was listening to your whole book, I'm like, this is a spiritual practice for atheists. Like anybody, I mean,
Yes.
anybody, agnostic. I mean,
Yes.
and it doesn't matter if you're a Christian or a Jew or whatever.
Uh,
This transcends ideology,
I agree.
except that it's about being present, being in your body,
Yes.
feeling the locus of control within yourself, not
Yes.
being taken over by negative thoughts or negative feelings, and establishing a harmony within yourself and whatever's happening. And as I was listening, I was like, this is very Zen. And that
Mm-hmm.
was before you were introducing Brother David's work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'd love for you to talk about, his practice and how that's
Sure.
informed you too.
Sure. So, I mean, just so people know, I think maybe my background is also important before I talk about Brother David.
Oh,
I
please.
come to this work having been raised without church, without any
Mm.
faith
Mhm.
practice at all. And my
Mhm.
parents were so incredible and smart, I think, because what they said to me was, we believe that your relationship to those kinds of choices in your life about what you're going to believe, that those are adult
Mm.
choices.
Mhm.
And I have forever honored them for that in me, because it allowed me to develop and to explore and to navigate and to be, and to reject and to
Mhm.
doubt and to embrace and to really be a discerning um a discerning consumer in some ways
Mhm.
of what I was going to believe. And you're right that it transcends ideology. I think that's super, super important, because people are attracted to this way of living, this practice, because they want to live more fully, more joyfully, more present. As soon as they recognize, it's like, yes, I want to be more here for what life is right now, because so many of us, especially if we've been traumatized or hurt, if we've been hijacked in our own thinking or been abused in a variety of ways in relationship and stuff, we protect our hearts. We shut down. It's such a
Mm.
typical reaction, as
Mhm.
opposed to how do I navigate life in a way where I can open my heart and still stay safe and trust myself
Mm.
as a consumer of my choices, as someone who's going to be wise in what I take in and what I allow to influence me.
Mm.
So Brother David Steindl-Rast is a Benedictine, this really radically funky, amazing guy who's 96 years old. He's 96. He's alive still. He's in Austria. He's writing. And one of the things that I loved about him and that made him so embraceable for me in terms of what he was positioning about life,
Mhm.
he came to gratefulness through the Second World War and surviving bombings and
Mm.
coming out of these bombings. And just like you and I are saying about these near miss accidents and these cancer experiences and even cult experiences, the things that don't kill us,
Mhm.
right? So he came out of these basements with all these friends. They were
Right.
teenagers. And he would say, I've never seen a bluer sky. The joy that came as a contrast when I realized that I could actually be alive into this moment, it was like he got that. And so there was something about embracing death for him and his mortality at a young age that really woke him up to
Mm.
living gratefully. So,
Mhm.
and he's very close to major Jewish leaders, Buddhist leaders, Hindu leaders, Thich Nhat Hanh, Dalai Lama, Desmond Tutu. He's one of these people who has been given um, wide berth to explore and research and have scholarships and interfaith kinds of ways of thinking, and
Mhm.
that makes me trust that, because anything that has that openness, the
Mhm.
open edges and the open boundaries to exploration, for me allows for all kinds of interpretation. And that's what I did with what his teachings were,
Mm.
Stephen, as I actually went into this and I said there is a very secular, more psych more not, you can call it spiritual, but you can also call it very well-being based. It's really
Mm.
a recipe for well-being, a
Yes.
recipe for aliveness. And it's really held in this way of how do we live our lives gratefully? But it's not a formula and it's not a prescription. And that's what I think is most awesome about this and why you're interested in it. And I'm so excited to be interviewing here with you is I think that the people like me who reject the ideas of formulas for all people, anything that's one size fits all, or a prescription that's one
Mhm.
size fits all, this makes sense because people would say, well, how do I do it? And I'd say, well, how do you live your life? It's about you and where this fits for you and where you can live more gratefully and what you want to wake up to. There isn't one path, and you don't sit on a cushion and have one mantra. You don't sit down and have to close your eyes for 45 minutes, because that wouldn't work for me. There's
Doesn't
no
work for me anymore.
no
I've
big
done many of
prescription.
those. Mhm.
Yeah. So I think that makes it accessible for a lot of different types of people. And it's got some deep spiritual roots in a way that I think makes it kind of trustworthy, because it's been tested over a long period of time. and
Mm-hmm.
has a kind of scholarship to it, and Brother David being such an elder. But then I think it's highly interpretable, and we love that. We love everybody saying, "What's my way of living gratefully?" And that's only the best thing that could possibly happen.
Right. And I can't help but note that so many people are so worried. They're worried about the pandemic. They're worried about
Hmm.
politics. They're worried about the
Yes.
economy. And,
The climate.
the
Can we talk about
climate
the earth? Right,
crisis,
exactly.
especially. And that, and the idea isn't to, make it go away and not feel like
Right.
you have a commitment to help fight the global climate uh,
Yeah.
uh, people who are promoting disinformation and hoaxes and stuff because they have fossil fuels, etc., and other dictatorships. It is really, I don't know what I'm trying to get at. It
I
is
do.
okay. Please take it over.
It's a both and,
Yes.
because there are people who say, I'm against positive psychology as a replacement for, that you only think positive thoughts. That's right there. We've got a problem because
Yep.
it doesn't acknowledge reality. So to
Exactly.
me, part of what Grateful Living does that's so of interest to you and the folks who are interested in what you're looking at is that Grateful Living basically says we are. There's a quote in something I wrote recently that I think is super important. Um, and I always try to remember because I can never kind of say it extemporaneously the way that I wrote it. So it's um, we do not betray our concerns for the world when we fill our hearts with joy and love and our eyes with wonder. We nourish our capacity to attend to our concerns for the world.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we feel so disempowered and so depressed and so undone by everything, which I can struggle with as much as anybody,
Mm-hmm.
we are so ineffective. Like I have so little impact that I can make when I just feel like, okay, this is just. So what happens is when am able to balance all those places of deep concern for the world with joy and wonder and love and being grateful for the moment that's here,
Right.
then I'm much more attuned to opportunities to make a difference. I have more energy. And you think about what is it that propels us, to be able to make
Mm-hmm.
a difference in our lives. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's those kinds of things. It doesn't usually come from the deep, dark funk that we tend to sit around in when we watch the news and go, oh my God, everything is so dire and dour that there's nothing to do about it. So
Right.
we say, fill your eyes with wonder, see the ordinary as extraordinary, notice those things, and then preserve what you love, protect what you love, do your social work in the world from a place of love and wanting to, um, I just think, preserve and protect the things that you care about and are grateful for.
Right. And I love that you have humility and honesty and say, I struggle with this myself. I've been teaching this for years, but it's not an easy practice. And I have to keep bringing myself back to that love and that beingness, that presence. Um,
And so right. You are so right. And thank you, because I think anybody who says they don't struggle is for me just a big red flag, right? Like
y-
I don't want to
yep.
learn, I don't want to learn anything from somebody who's not fully human,
Yeah.
right? I'm interested in learning from people who are on the human journey and who are talking about how challenging it is to combat all the forces in our world that want to take
Right.
us, all kinds of directions and stuff. So I think this is what's important is, yeah, it takes a lot of work and it's worth every iota of effort.
Yeah, and you were not idolizing Brother David at all. You were just doing the attribution that any
Yeah.
good academic scholar would do. Hey,
Thank
this
you.
was a major influence in the evolution of my thinking and beingness now.
Absolutely. And it's also it's not a next level, it's not hierarchical, it's just saying here's this wellspring of scholarship that can inform quality of life. Who are we to question it in its entirety when open for interpretation or channeled through other different people or lived in different ways or talked about in different ways? It speaks to people who are, it's just beautiful. Basically it's about life is precious, life is short, What are you going to do about it? And it really makes sense to acknowledge that life is precious and short,
Yep.
and to say, okay, am I going to, just lie under my bed and just wait until it's all over? Or am I going to say, wow, this day is so full of possibility. I want to live this day. Like, this wakes me
Yeah.
up to want to live, to really realize that that's what it is.
Yeah. And you share in your book about when you wake up to acknowledge, hey, I'm awake. I have
Right.
fingers that
Right.
work. I have
Right.
eyes that can see and skin that can feel and just be
Exactly.
so beautiful, really.
Thank you.
It's in a way what I teach my clients. I'm a psychotherapist, is to be present in your body, because mind
Mhm.
control is a dissociative disorder. The way I think
Mm,
about it, you're
mm,
being programmed with an alternate identity and belief system, and not connected to your
mm.
bodiness, that we are biopsychosocial beings who inhabit,
Beautiful.
you know,
Yeah.
ourselves.
That's so cool because, and I haven't really thought about that before, but where does the intuition resides on a somatic level in the body on so many levels, right? When I hear
Hmm.
something that rings as the truth, I experience it physically. If you only filter things through the mind doesn't, I don't think, allow us to register in the same way. So if you get cut off from your body, and if
Hmm.
that's the prescription, is to kind of get cut off from getting, just go through your mind, then you're going to miss those signals that say, this isn't feeling true for me, or I'm having big, deep questions here that aren't being addressed, or I'm right. So you're much more susceptible,
Yep.
I, I would say, to defying and denying yourself.
Right.
And so there's something about living really into that and trusting the intuition that the body holds,
Yep.
that's so powerful and also dangerous in a good way. you
Well, it's
know
dangerous in terms of the power
yeah,
entities that want to make us consumers and buy products and think it will make us happy, when
totally.
buying products are empty. It's an empty promise.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know a lot about how you talk, but to me, the cult of consumerism may be the largest cult of all, right? And in this country, we are all so susceptible, and the things, I like to think of contentment as a radical proposition. Again, this word radical, which is kind of like the place where powerful and dangerous meet, right? So
Hmm.
transformative is that it actually challenges so much of the power systems that are in place or whatever. If
Hmm.
we walk around feeling fully sufficient, fully content, um, we're way more likely to be generous rather than consumptive.
Hmm.
Where the more we feel that there's sufficiency in our lives, the more likely we are to want to, walk right past, windows and stores and online ads and television and all that kind of stuff, and just kind of say, I know what matters to me, and it's not there because it's enough. It's enough to be alive. It's enough to be here. And on some level, when you start really embracing the ordinary as extraordinary, it hugely reduces the number of things you might need, because when you really relate to each thing that you have as this kind of mind-blowing miraculous thing, like, wow, I have this shirt, and like, think of how many people were involved in making this shirt and getting this shirt so that
Right.
I could wear it, and the dyes and the people who wove and the machine, the thing, and people who ship things. And so when you really get into a relationship with understanding and studying what is in your
Hmm.
life, I
Yeah.
think it makes us less susceptible to wanting more. That whole
Yeah.
idea that more, better, and different are going to solve everything.
Yeah, so in my last book, I talk about Edward Bernays.
Hmm.
Does that name ring a
No,
bell? He's the
no.
was the nephew of Freud, and he was the
Hmm.
first. He wrote a book called Propaganda in 1928. He
Wow,
was
great.
involved in World War One to help message, and mobilize people to war and sell bonds, etc. but he became the godfather of PR, and
Mm,
his whole thing was create a need, and then people will want to buy the product.
sure.
And and um and, and there's a wonderful documentary by Adam Curtis called The Century of the Self, if you
Mm,
want a
mm.
really deep
Gonna write it
uh,
down. Hmm.
overview of how we got to where we are now,
Yeah,
because now we're in an information overload thing where we're addicted to our smartphones and our
right.
platforms, where the engineers of the social media are deliberately
Oh yeah.
making dopamine hits.
Oh yeah.
Where
Oh,
and is life, do I want to text to someone who's in the next room, or should I get up and walk over and
right. Well, we've
interact with?
forgotten. And also, COVID, I think, made it so much worse because I
Yeah.
think we forgot how to be in human interactions on so many levels. I think we forgot to want them.
Mm,
Sometimes I realize, oh, I have neighbors I can go walk over and go see. There was, 2 years where really we hardly left the house. Honestly, it feels like on
mm,
so many levels, and everybody was scary, and we masks on and stuff. And there's good reason for all that. And it's also important to remember the agency that we do have to create the lives that we do want.
yeah.
And there's all these people, and we all fall prey to it. I mean, I sit in front of a computer screen so many hours a day. It's just ridiculous because that's what my
Guilty.
work is. That's what my work is, right? Guilty. um and I also try to be really discerning about where I put my attention within that place of not having so much of a choice about how I work in my job. Where I put my attention
Yeah.
is really my choice. So nobody, I don't know many people who have a relationship to social media who are happier and feel more of a sense of belonging on a deep level than they did before they
Oh,
got
there's
into social
research.
media.
In fact, I
Yeah.
have a guest that I'm lining up who did a book about the damage of social media on
Yeah.
children,
Yeah.
brain damage in the sense
Yeah.
of not developing the
So scary.
intuition and reading cues, not looking at a face on a screen, but actually we're picking up information and connection and mirror neurons by
Yes.
being in each other's presence.
100%
And as a
true.
therapist, I can tell you hands down, because I do stuff on Zoom and whatever, but hands down, I can't get that connection and help people really transform
Hmm.
without being present with them,
Hmm.
without being in the same room and just them feeling intuitively and in their gut that
Yeah.
what I'm saying in terms of them connecting to their disparate parts that may have been dismantled or compartmentalized because they were corporally punished as a child or whatever.
Yeah, and I think so maybe the lesson or the message is really it's both and, because Zoom has expanded our lives. We can do things like this. What the heck? It's just incredible, right?
Mm,
So to appreciate these kinds of opportunities, but not to do it forsaking all these other opportunities we have to actually connect human to human, and
definitely.
that it doesn't take the place of it.
Right.
And just like, you know positive psychology doesn't supplant difficult emotions. It does. It's just like I'm going to think so many positive thoughts right in a row all the time that, like, I'm never going to feel this thing. It's like what we deny,
Right.
is going to come back to bite us. So I think, there's all of that that's true as well.
Yeah, and then there's the extreme negatives of thinking if I only believe 100%, I can materialize, a
Oh,
Porsche or a husband or a wife, or there's this law of positive attraction that's, going to magically deliver things. And it's like, no, 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 no.
that's
Please,
actually, I want to talk about that a minute, because
please.
um because this law of attraction
Which
model
isn't a
is
law.
it's
It's not
really,
scientific.
really frightening to me a lot of the
Mm.
times. And there's the woman who wrote the book The Secret,
Mm-hmm.
also wrote a book called Magic or something, and it's all about gratitude.
Mm.
And it's about gratitude as the that when you're grateful, no negative thoughts will come your way. You will have the relationships of your dream. Like it sells gratitude in the most frightening, commodified way, and
Mm-hmm.
it's so prescriptive. And so when people, then it's this whole thing of you get scared when you do have a negative thought or you don't feel grateful all the time. And that's to me the worst. Like that was what I dealt with when I had cancer too, which was this whole idea that you could live if you wanted to live. The belief, like, right? So
Yeah, you can
that only
undo your
people,
cancer, or why the worst is like, why did you create the cancer, Steve? What was
right,
it that you were trying to get people's attention? And I'm like,
right,
no, maybe I wasn't
right.
sleeping enough and I was working too hard and my immune system broke down. But
That's right. I mean, who knows? But also
right.
just to say that there are things that are mysterious in life, right? Like it's not like you, because you have cancer, you chose to have it. And if you die of cancer, it's not because you didn't want to live. And that's a
Exactly.
sales job that's out there, I think, sometimes in some people's minds, that's very as long as you don't have cancer, and as long as you're as long as you didn't die, nobody you love died from it, you can kind of walk around and go like, oh, okay, I the fountain of youth is mine, and I can do all these things, and I'm going to prevent death, and I'm going to prevent disease. And but the truth is, it's a lot more it's a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah,
And
complex was the word I was coming up with. It's just
yeah,
life is very complex and we live in a mystery. I mean,
yeah,
we look at outer space and dark matter comprises 99% of what's out there and we have no idea what it is.
yeah,
It's like,
right.
huh?
Right. And if you choose to kind of be in awe of life instead of needing to make everything decomplexifying, so the
Mm,
simplifications don't really work. So, but I
mm-hmm,
think, I think those, I have a friend who is part of a spiritual community, and she talks about the danger of concepts. That
mm,
we get these concepts, and certain concepts are really sold as be all end alls, and they're one size fits all, um, and so I think what I would just say is just I think this idea of living gratefully, it is something that can coexist with all other things.
mm-hmm,
So that what we do is we just return to it. It's not like it's, oh my God, look at, I just have spent the past 25 minutes not being grateful. I better get back to being grateful. It's like, oh yeah, I can reframe my experience. I can get a larger perspective on what's happening right now. I can remember that, you know, um, oh, all the different things of just what is extraordinary about the day, or where there are blessings in the day, or what we have the opportunity to cultivate and to
mm-hmm.
be with. So just I think losing sight of that is really the hardest part of all.
Yeah. So I also want to just share because I do a lot of religious, cult counseling. So of course I've had to study the major religions, and it seems to me that the great commandment of loving God with all your heart, mind, and strength, loving your neighbor as you love yourself,
Mm,
for me, and I belong to a renewal temple for 24 years, and the founding rabbi was asked to go meet the Dalai Lama
mm,
to explain how the Jews survived in exile when because of Chinese
in,
attacks and
yeah,
exploitation of the Tibetan people. Anyway, the idea of all your heart includes your negative emotions. Like
it's
most
true.
people don't realize that. Loving others, okay, but you have to love yourself to really
Hmm.
have that
Hmm.
connection on all levels. And a lot of people get into spiritual practices where they're denying their self, they're hating their body, and other kinds of less loving connections to
Uh,
to what
Totally. No, and I'm sorry to interrupt you with my
No,
feeling there.
and contradict me if you don't agree with
No,
anything
I'm
that I
just
say.
thinking because of what
Hmm.
I'm thinking is that loving other people, if we really abide by that, to love all others, um, is again in this really beautiful way dangerous. It's
Hmm.
dangerous to ideology because you're open to other people's ideas, you're open to being changed, you're open to being, I think about the grandson of, was it David Duke from the KKK? One of the most powerful interviews I've ever heard was about when he met his
Yeah,
Jewish
he came
friend
over for Shabbat dinner,
at
and
Shabbat
he
dinner.
was raised to hate Jews and think how horrible they were, and it was like, I like these people. These are cool. Like,
Right.
made him
But
question.
how that came about exactly is through this young beautiful Jewish man not having an agenda but just committing to loving this person, and then and slowly this young man who had been raised with all of this incredibly horrible racist and ethnocentric, ideology was transformed slowly in this way that is so beautiful. But if you say, like so many ideologies do, like it's only us, people who look like me, people who act like me, and so become more ideologically insular all the
Yeah.
time. Nobody threatens your ways of thinking. Whereas love is open.
Hmm.
Love opens itself, if you're going to love other people, to being influenced in a way by them, but
Sure.
equally not just like one person, but just I'm open, and therefore um I'm not controllable.
Right. One of the keys is like knowing yourself, being present to what are my values. And
Yes.
I've been saying for 46 years that when you're meeting someone who's a neo-Nazi, fascist, who's yelling at you, it's hard not to get defensive or reactive and be angry at them. But in my mind, I'm telling myself, underneath it is a person who's really in a lot of pain and
Hmm.
has been treated really badly, and there's hope that they can wake up. So I always have the attitude of, don't like the behavior, don't like the
Yeah.
beliefs, but go for the beingness.
Yeah.
And if you're kind and if you're respectful and you ask questions like, help me understand your
Yeah.
beliefs, it opens a channel to reciprocate. So you have a chance potentially to also influence them.
Totally true, and really hard practice. When
Yes.
someone is, um S you know, it's interesting because, um, my partner is a woman, I will just say, and I don't talk
Hmm.
about that very often,
Hmm.
but I made a choice later in life to be in love with a woman, and, no matter how people feel, I kinda go, "Oh god, now, what will people think?" But what's interesting is also too that, there were people in the beginning who said, who wrote and said, "I always had these ideas about gay people." And because you are who you are and you're out there, all of a sudden it's contradicting what I was
Mm.
told was true. And so the willingness, maybe one of the most courageous things that any of us have the ability to do, is to be ourselves fully, and to allow ourselves to be seen, and allow ourselves to be loving, and to love other people, and to be loved in this way that opens the heart against all of that narrowing that so
Yes.
many ideologies want to do and life wants to do. So, I just think it's been really, some of the more powerful things for me have been when people have had assumptions about me that
Hmm.
I've been able to, just by being who I am,
Hmm.
kind of crack open and help something become more expansive in
Yeah, you're
them.
being a role model. It's really, you're sharing your journey,
Yeah.
and you're a teacher. Like, you have that heart in you to want to not just practice it for yourself, but you get joy. That's my projection onto
Yeah,
having listened to your book, but that I get joy out of helping people. That's why I
right.
do it.
Right. And I think here's the truth for like almost everybody listening is, what are those truths about ourselves that we can share that set other people free?
Hmm.
So, what are the truths about ourselves that we often put in the closet, hide, don't tell? And people have been, when people really come forth and share their authentic experiences and share what's been painful and talk about their stories, it liberates so many other people who feel so isolated and alone
Yeah.
and pathologized because of their experience. And so there's like, who are we to keep those things to ourselves in some ways sometimes, I think, to
Sure.
yeah. So
Sure.
the
And I,
invitation.
having been trained to do couples counseling over the decades, and having been in couples counseling myself with my wife, um, understanding that a good partner accepts you and
Hmm.
doesn't try to change you,
Hmm.
but so many people get into relationships and they're like, oh, I don't like this about him or her, and
Hmm.
I'll fix them, but they're not asking to be fixed.
Yeah, I remember going to a workshop a long time ago called Harville Hendricks, right? Getting the love you
Oh.
need. And
Mhm.
getting the love you need, what he said was, I've got bad news for all of you who've come here because it means giving the love that is needed. So it's like, oh, all these people brought their partners, towed them along on leashes and stuff, and said, let's let's go to this workshop because I need to get the love I need. And
Mm.
meanwhile, so what he and his wife Helen said is, for those of you who brought your partner thinking you were going to get the love you needed, what's really needed is for you to give the love that is needed. Otherwise, you're not going to get the love that's needed. So
Yeah.
it's yeah,
Yeah.
it's a pretty simple prescription there, but
Yeah. I was
it's
just
a,
going to add, because I'm familiar with his work, of course, that his thesis is that we seek out partners
yeah,
who have positive and negative attributes of our parents, and that on an unconscious level we're trying to heal ourselves
to
from our childhood with our parents.
yeah, and yet we also want to just absolutely strip away all those things about that person that are different than we are, and that I want you to be more like me, right? Which means that there's not only not healing, but there's not a lot of learning, and there's all that, like the illusion of control, that we actually can change somebody. It's so liberating to accept somebody else. And I think, I just to return to grateful living a little bit is to say, I think it's really powerful to practice gratefulness, to practice being appreciative in our relationships, especially in the relationships that we're closest to, and to watch how they transform. Because we one of the things I say is that we really forget that this person who we live with, just like we, at the end of any day that's been full and rich and provocative and interesting
Hmm.
or hard or beautiful or whatever, we're a different person at the end of the day. But we
Hmm.
completely forget that our partners are not the same person who left the house in the morning or who we had dinner with last night. And so we stop being curious, and we stop appreciating the presence of the other person.
Mm.
And if there were ever a realm of taking for granted, it's intimate relationships. I
Yeah.
think we realize, just, okay, well, now I've got you. Now I don't have to worry about you. So now I'm just going to go and worry about everything else and focus on other things. And I think turning appreciation towards our relationships, it's really, it's a way to make your relationships flourish. And it's so gorgeous when it happens,
Hmm.
because you realize it costs you nothing,
Mm.
and to be generous and to acknowledge, it's really very powerful.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
liberating. And as someone who's worked with former neo Nazis and other people in hate groups, they all report how hard it is to hate all the time. Like, it's
Mm,
so debilitating and so narrowing.
mm,
And I agree with you that life is about growth and appreciation and
yeah.
realizing not putting people in boxes and thinking they're static forever, but this this wonder and
Yeah.
awe,
Wonder and awe.
and curiosity. I love that you brought up the word curiosity,
So
having an
huge.
attitude, the opposite of I know it all. I'm an
Mm,
expert. Yeah.
right. Well, and thank you for being curious about this work and about being open to it. So, like, we're only enriched, right, by all those things that we add into our quiver, to our lexicon, to our tool belt, or all those things. It's like take in more and more and more. Trust yourself as a person who can filter and discern, and you enrich whatever is the core basis of who you are. You just keep adding to that, and it's
Mm,
it's truly delightful. And I think
mm,
what a great way to I really think that people, you know, back to being grateful again, people will say to me, like, how can you be grateful? There's so much awful stuff in the
mm,
world, and it's really true. And what's important is it's this way of being doesn't ask us to be grateful for everything that happens,
right.
but it says if you can hold that gratefulness of heart, then you're holding also the balance. When things are super hard, you're not forgetting that life is also magical, and that love is extraordinary, and that the natural world is enough to blow your socks off, and that the stars at night, and like, so you hold that sense at the same time as you hold the difficulties, and
Hmm.
in that balance we're way more likely to be effective in our lives and more joyful in our lives and everything. So I think there's a lot to be said about, it's not that we have to forsake what's hard. It's
Hmm.
that we have to understand that being grateful is also really called for.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of religions have prayer as a
Hmm.
major activity.
Hmm.
And at least in my experience interacting with people, they can get automatized to just repeating the words. But
Right.
I think what it's really about is if you're saying a prayer over food, like acknowledging the miraculous aspects of this food and how the colors and the
That's
texture
right.
and the smells and
I think right on. Like, it's like to say grace. Think how many people say grace, and it's like they know it by heart. It's rote. They don't, or
exactly.
your little prayers that you say and stuff, but it doesn't really mean anything. Instead, I remember when somebody said, try to find a food that does not connect to the earth. Like, think about how everything on your plate, if it's not synthetic, is connected to the earth in some way, from salt to pepper to to meat to vegetables to fruits to starches and drinks. And I think of all of what it took to get it there.
Hmm.
Thich Nhat Hanh really talks about this is the food. Your food is nothing short of a miracle, and if you take it into your body as this extraordinary miraculous thing that it is,
Hmm.
it's more likely to actually be, you're more likely to savor it. You're going to eat more slowly. It's not that it's magic and it's
Mm,
like if you eat, but it's more like if you appreciate your food, you're going to savor it. If
yeah.
you appreciate people, you're going to savor them. If you appreciate your moments, you're going to savor them. You're going to be much more likely to want to live really fully into the opportunities that life has given you. So
Yeah.
why not? I mean, you've got nothing to lose,
No,
really.
and I guess I also want to comment that this being philosophy practice isn't intellectual and it's not
Mm-mm,
emotional. It's beingness practice,
mm-mm,
and like we now know we think with our guts too. We have
mm-hmm,
neurons in our
mm-hmm,
in our guts. It's not
mm-hmm.
just up here, and that so many people I've worked with over the decades, I'd say, think back to your first exposure to the cult leader. What's your recollection of that? Oh, I thought he was crazy, or I had this knot in my stomach. And
Yes,
I'm
exactly.
like, okay, now you're going to remember, you're going to
Yeah,
connect that you should always listen to what your body's telling you and make it
beautiful.
yourself curious and go, what's that about? I'm having a knot in my stomach. That's not a good feeling.
That's right.
It's an
I
early
think that's,
warning system in many
yes.
cases as well.
Yep. Notice how your body's experiencing your life and how your thoughts affect your body and your experience. So it's like it's a big cycle. And there's
Right.
I think that whole the idea of beingness is not something I've talked about much, but I like it because there's all these different ways of being and there's well-being. So,
Yes.
what is contributing to your well-being and
Mm.
how can you enhance your well-being, which is just the being well
Hmm.
in your mind, body, spirit, and your heart. And I think there's so much opportunity for that. And certainly appreciating what's here in life right now is a fabulous and pretty expedient pathway
Yeah.
to connecting with well-being.
So tell our audience a little bit more about your nonprofit that you're the
Sure.
executive director of, please.
Thank you. Um, so I've been the executive director for 8.5 years. It's called a Network for Grateful Living, but we're about to change our name to Grateful Living, just to make it a little bit shorter and easier. We have a gorgeous website at gratefulness.org. And what that is it's just tons and tons and tons of inspiration and practices and invitations and images and things that help us, because one of the things that I say is you can't just say, "Oh, I want to be more grateful all the time," because it's going to go away. It's like you have to feed it. Like you have to feed a plant. You have to nourish your commitment. And
Hmm.
so what we do is we offer the nourishment for the practice of, to keep coming back and just say, "Okay, here's a quote, here's a question that helps me remember." And the big thing is perspective. So I think what we do is we really help people have perspective on their experience of
Hmm.
life,
Hmm.
and perspective is dangerous to people who don't want you to have perspective, but it's so rich because it broadens our view. It allows us to take the viewpoint of other people. It allows us to see who we are and where we are from much bigger vantage points. It makes more vast and also more granular our experience of life. So I think perspective is really important, and how we bring perspective into our lives, those are kind of the things that we want to, those are very personal, and the website gives tons of that. And so Grateful Living, a network for grateful living, the book was really a joy to to leave to the world in some way. I hope it contributes.
Well, I
And
I rarely, I mean, I read a lot of books and I almost never finish a book and go, I agree with everything. Like there wasn't anything I disagreed with. It
that's
was very extraordinary, but I just want to say for my listeners, it was
thank you.
uplifting. It was like a
Thank
shot
you.
of hope and goodness
That's
to
something. Yeah, thank you.
yeah, I mean
I
it. I really
It was
do.
hard to write. It's hard. It was my first book. It's not easy to write a book. It was so
Done for, I know very well.
I know. I'm incredibly grateful to you for this support and praise, because I take it really to heart from you, and because especially you're an accomplished writer. And so for me, I'm so humble about it. And I literally, my prayer is that it serves, period, that
Yeah.
it just, and that it speaks to people.
Well, I really believe that. Take my word for it, you listeners. If you
Thank you.
listen to this book, you will thank me, I believe. And I just want to
Mm,
come back to what you were saying before about perspective, because it's such
hmm.
a critical part of my work.
Yeah, good.
Because the cure to blind faith is
Mm.
perspective, being able to
Mm,
step out of the worldview of the cult, the
totally. Hmm.
authoritarian, and look at it from an ex-member's point of view, or from a
Hmm.
theologian's point of view, or a spiritual teacher's point of view. And I just want to do a shout out to Adam Grant's book, Think
Mm.
Again.
Oh,
Adam
what a
Grant is a
good
social
writer.
psychologist. And he basically in this book said, like, separate your ego from your beliefs. Like, beliefs can change. Just be open to learning and be curious and ask
Mm,
questions and
mm.
expand towards a more robust, full future. And
Beautiful.
I love that.
I do too. I love him. I love his work. And yeah, so onward we go, all of
Yes,
us.
thank you.
You're
We're
so
wrapping
welcome.
up.
Thank you
And
so much for this
and
time.
your center is based in
It's
Massachusetts?
virtual. We're,
Oh,
I'm based in Massachusetts, but I think, oh, I wanted to say one thing, which is if you listen to the book, also, it's really good to have it written too, because people say they dog ear the pages and they underline things. And the tactile sense of the book itself is also something for a lot of people that really works. So
I'm
find
gonna
the way that
buy
works.
the
But
paperback too, and
great. It's coming out in paperback next year. Thank you.
okay, great. So thank you so much, and we'll be in touch in the future. Thank you.
I hope so. I'm really
Great,
privileged for this time. Thanks, everyone.
great.